let's welcome Air Professor Dr. Reinhard Zoellner.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy, for the very kind introduction. As I told you, it's usual to drop the doctor if you have a professor in Germany, so just call me. Okay, well, fine. I'm kidding. So it's a great honor and a great pleasure to be invited again to Ann Arbor. My wife and I had a wonderful week here, and we chose just the perfect timing, I guess, in terms of weather and so on. And so I feel really happy and on the other hand also a bit nervous because what I'm going to tell you today is, of course, somewhat different from the usual topics you would expect me to deliver. But I can tell you in secret that I have been doing, thinking about this kind of topic for several years now. And just in March, some days before the earthquake happened, I paid a short visit to the Studio Ghibli in Tokyo to take some photographs from the outside. And all of a sudden, I'd never expected, I came across or ran into Miyazaki Hayao himself. And he was very friendly, and we exchanged meishi, I gave him my, he doesn't seem to have one anyway, but, I'll show you a picture of him afterwards with a nice story to it if we have time enough. Anyway, so. Okay, we came to deliver What You Have Forgotten, Studio Ghibli as producer of cultural memory. So why does someone like me, who usually deals with serious history and historiography, how does he justify his jumping into a field such as anime studies that in many regards belongs to a different academic domain? I'm not doing this to challenge anything done in the media sciences, visual studies, art history, cultural anthropology, or any other discipline that has its own approach to anime. I'm doing this because I see in this specific case something that concerns actually many of the main topics of my own field, namely the production of memory and its commodification. These are classical fields of research for historians, in particular when we assume that any kind of temporal information has to be communicated. History, both as argument and as topic, is present in so many aspects of the words and works and authors in question that it seems very justifiable for me to cover them in quite the same way as, say, medieval picture scrolls or early modern Gunki Monogatari military tales. They all are part of the Japanese culture, and as such, sooner or later, will be included in any textbook on Japanese cultural history. So if I don't do it now, one of my students will certainly do it, so why wait? On the 28th of March 2011, 17 days after the magnitude 9.0 earthquake hit Japan and caused a giant tsunami, which in turn devastated the northeastern parts of Japan and fatally damaged the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, anime director Miyazaki Hayao, who was born in 1941, presented a new movie produced by his Studio Ghibli at a press conference. That's not the press conference. We'll talk about that later. He also felt compelled to deliver a statement about the current events that had led to distress and fear among many Japanese and non-Japanese. Miyazaki's statement runs as follows. Again and again, our islands have been attacked by earthquakes, volcanoes, or typhoons. Yet, I still think that our country is blessed with extraordinary natural riches. In spite of all misery and hardships, I believe that it is worthwhile to struggle to make these islands even more beautiful. Since we have managed to build up our own country amidst such natural disasters, we need not give up hope. The question is rather how to control the Promethean fire, which means nuclear power, as it really seems that we will lose part of our territory because of the nuclear disaster. The question arises how we can react to this situation. I myself am now so old that I have decided not to withdraw even a single step from this soil. End of quote. Now Miyazaki, when he made the statement, had just turned 70. So that's his current age. You can see him leading here a mini anti-nuclear power protest in the vicinity of the Studio Ghibli in Tokyo, Higashikogane. Actually, I think it was just him and the two assistants. But what they did was they went to a nearby building which is very well visible from the Chuo line, actually. And if you have a look outside and after you pass Higashikogane, you can see it maybe Studio. So it says Studio Ghibli wants to produce films without nuclear power, and I think this makes it quite clear what is the political or should we say nuclear position of Miyazaki and his friends. So the anime production company that Miyazaki established in 1985, together with his friends Takahata Isao and Suzuki Toshio, is called Studio Ghibli in Japanese or Studio Ghibli in English. By the way, Ghibli or Ghibli, well, Ghibli is actually the Arab Italian for Scirocco, which is a hot wind in the Sahara Desert. So that's why they call their magazine, the house magazine, Neppu, hot wind. So they wanted to bring some fresh and hot wind into the anime industry. That was why they chose this name. Since its beginnings, Studio Ghibli produced 17 feature-length anime movies. For the past decade, this company has been ranked, in the eyes of the Japanese consumers, among the top 10 brands of the whole Japanese industry, on parity with global players such as Panasonic, Suntory, Toyota, but also Google, YouTube, and Disney. Of course, Ghibli is making much less money than any of these rivals. But that is not the point. For the last 25 years, Ghibli has been one of the main producers of Japanese cultural capital. International film prizes such as the Academy Award, the Golden Bear at Berlin, and the Golden Ocello at Venice, and exhibitions at Paris and the New York Museum of Modern Art have added to their fame. Ghibli is a leading representative of J-pop, or Japanese pop culture. Whenever you ask young students outside Japan why they are interested in learning Japanese or majoring in Japanese studies, there will be a substantial portion who admit being attracted to the world of J-pop and particularly to anime made by Ghibli. Thus, Ghibli has become a cornerstone of what is now called contents business in Japanese. Actually, that's a Japanese-English term, right? Contents business signifying an industrial complex which tries to invent and market cultural identities, to put it very short. Miyazaki himself is very outspoken about the business side of his enterprise. He stated rather bluntly that, quote, "The task of our popular culture is basically different from so enormously awe-inspiring and radical things such as art and or creativity. Let us stop fooling ourselves with words like artist. I do not think it is bad if a child encounters beautiful anime. But at the same time, I know that our job is a business aiming at the purchasing power of children." Unquote. In this regard, Studio Ghibli is no different from many other enterprises. There have been highly successful anime productions before and outside of Studio Ghibli. But the Ghibli productions have a particular selling point, a specific quality that has become their special trademark. Anime director Oshii Mamoru, 10 years younger than Miyazaki and famous for more avant-garde films such as Ghost in the Shell or Innocent, is known for his critical attitude towards Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki. But there's one thing he admits without hesitating. Yeah, that's one of the things I learned when I met this guy, just how interesting old-time stuff is. You could call him a man from the world of heroic storybooks. He knew a great deal about it, unquote. Now this is, of course, partially poisoned praise. Heroic storybooks, or kodanbon in Japanese, used to be an extremely popular genre of literature before the cinema became popular in the 1920s. They dramatized historic events such as war tales, blending them with what we could call human interest stories. While admitting that Miyazaki has the talent to present old-time stuff in a fascinating way, Oshii claims that Miyazaki is just that, old-time stuff of a past era. But at least it's interesting old stuff. For a historian, that may be sufficient and acceptable. For an anime, it may not. Except if it is the intention of the author to make time and memory itself the subject of discussion. In the following, I will argue that this is exactly the case with Miyazaki and Takata. However, they do not treat time as historical, coherent time. Anime time cannot be measured in decades or years or months, and the boundaries between past, present, and future are blurred. It has frequently been stated, for instance by Thomas Lemar, that Ghibli movies induce a feeling of nostalgia. But how can we develop nostalgic feelings towards something depicted in the movies that we have never experienced ourselves, like flying machines, fox squirrels, or moving castles? According to Susan Stewart, this lack of experience is exactly what calls nostalgia into life. Whenever we encounter any narrative, whether in a written or in a cinematic text, we know, of course, that it has, quote, lost the authenticity of lived experience, unquote. But we also hope that the narrative can offer us insights that allow us to share the experience anyhow. This is, of course, impossible, and therefore, quote, nostalgia is a sadness without an object, hostile to history and distinctly utopian, unquote. Now, Stewart goes so far as to call nostalgia a social disease. We will see that this analysis, in fact, comes quite close to the viewpoint of the Ghibli makers. In 2001, Miyazaki created Sento Chihiro no Kamikakushi, in English, Spirited Away. It is a story about a 12-year-old girl named Chihiro who, together with her parents, moves to the countryside. And many Miyazaki films are about people moving to somewhere. On the way to their new home, they discover an abandoned village, which they at first identify as a former theme park, but which is in fact a place where gods and other supernatural beings meet. Chihiro's parents start eating food that was miraculously served at a restaurant without knowing that it was reserved for the gods coming here for recreation. The parents turn into pigs. In order to free them, before they are slaughtered, Chihiro enters the service of a bathhouse owned by an old woman called Yubaba. With the help of Haku, the mysterious assistant of Yubaba and Yubaba's twin sister Zeniba, Chihiro succeeds in freeing her parents and also in giving Haku back his real identity as a river god. When you take these two sisters together, Yubaba and Zeniba, then you have the kanji, the characters for Sento, right? So this is a paid bathhouse. So it's very subtle play with the names. Anyway, Haku used to be a river god, and and once he saved the life of Chihiro when she was a young girl and fell into the river, and he forgot about this completely, but Chihiro helps him finally remember his own history and identity. At the end of the story, Chihiro and her parents return to the world of man and seem to have no more recollection of what had happened. It's interesting because we actually don't know whether this is meant to be a real story or just a daydream, something which actually never happened or was just taking place in the mind of Chihiro. Now, before they enter this so-called theme park, they have to cross a tower, a clock tower. And the clock tower scene is actually a very dense depiction of Miyazaki's attitude towards time and memory. There's an inscription on this Chinese-style clock tower, and it reads, Fukuraku, paradise regained. Now, Fukuraku-en is the Japanese translation of John Milton's 1671 sequel of Paradise Lost, or Shitsuraku-en in Japanese. The first lines of Paradise Regained are worth quoting because they have something in common with the story of Chihiro. I quote, I, who erewhile the happy garden sung, by one man's disobedience lost, now sing recovered paradise to all mankind. By one man's firm obedience fully tried through all temptation, and the tempter foiled in all his wiles, defeated and repulsed, and Eden raised in the waste wilderness. Unquote. Now you can imagine how Chihiro sort of fits into this image of, well, of course not one man, but one girl or one woman, who really is firmly obedient to the task which is attributed to her. We need, of course, not suppose that Miyazaki had exactly these lines in mind when he developed Chihiro's adventure. Still, the image is fitting. Her parents disobey the divine rules, and Chihiro has to go through a number of temptations to recover them. In the movie, she is virtually led to the gates of paradise because the inscription on the bathhouse where her adventure takes place reads Kodaku. And although Kodaku-en in Tokyo may best be known to young Japanese as the place of the famous baseball dome and amusement park, its original meaning is, of course, that of the latter paradise. More precisely, it is the place where you can enjoy the good things your ancestors have done for you. But what good have these average middle-class parents done for Chihiro? As becomes very clear from the beginning of the movie, she is materially pampered, but spiritually neglected. She knows nothing about the other world, the world beyond the gate they enter without realizing it. Basically, it is not her fault that she is not well prepared for this journey. It is parental neglect, parental impiety, which leads her whole family into the abyss. There is no latter paradise before they cross the gate, and it takes Chihiro's whole strength to regain it. Now, as early as 1979, Miyazaki Hayao stated that the adolescent boys and girls share the strong sense of nostalgia, or homesickness in Japanese, kyoshu, for the lost world. Now, homesickness is actually the original Greek meaning of nostalgia. And this yearning for the lost world, as Miyazaki put it, of the what he calls middle teens, is for him the main reason for the popularity of anime in Japan. Anime is a means of regaining the lost world. It has already been suggested, even by Miyazaki himself, to regard the bathhouse of Yubaba as an allegory of Studio Ghibli, reflecting the conditions under which anime are being produced there and elsewhere. Miyazaki evidently loves to tell double plots, where the hidden plot is centering around questions of anime production. This is also a very likely interpretation of the story of Porco Rosso, Kurenai no Buta, which superficially is set in the Adriatic Sea during the 1920s and features a pilot mysteriously turned pig, once again, who, while watching an American animated film, declares that it is better to stay a pig than become a fascist. A similar double play, by the way, his rival is an American pilot who has only one wish: to become Hollywood star and afterwards American president. Now guess who that was. A similar double play can also be seen in Ponyo on the Cliff. I'll skip that, but if you want to ask about that, we can explain that later. But if I'm right, Chihiro is the link not only between two, but between three plots. First, the real-life plot of this uprooted middle-class family on the verge of social collapse. Second, the plot of the middle heroine who subconsciously longs for the lost paradise and finds it in the world of animation. And third, rather than being part of the paying public in front of the screen or paying guest in the bathhouse, Chihiro becomes actively involved in the tedious and erratic production of anime, as represented by Studio Ghibli. It is therefore very fitting that the clock tower, the mentioned clock tower of Paradise Regained, has actually two different clock faces. The first, the upper clock, is absolutely strange. I'm sorry I didn't bring the picture. The first clock face has only Arabic numerals, but only the numbers 9, 6, 3, and 13. The positions of 3 and 9 are interchanged from their usual positions, making it highly likely that this clock actually moves backward. The number 13 has a particular meaning in Miyazaki movies, as exemplified in Kiki's delivery service, where the heroine, Kiki, according to an old custom among witches, has to leave her parents' home right after her 13th birthday. In Western clock faces, as well as in the East Asian zodiac cycle, 13 is the first digit in the new cycle. It becomes number 1 in a new life. This is not a simple reset. The grounds are laid in the previous, because you cannot deny history. So there was 12 before it became 13. But it is a critical chance to build up a new existence, a new identity on the grounds laid in the previous circle. Now that this clock moves backwards seems to stress the fact that a reset, a new beginning, is only possible by reconstructing and reviving the lost past. This then, to achieve this, is exactly Chihiro's task, both as an anime-watching youth and as a producer of anime. Time, as symbolized by the clock, is life time in the philosophical or spiritual meaning. The lower clock of the clock tower, however, is almost unreadable. The clock face seems to be written in Chinese characters, and it seems to move forward. This time, it seems, represents daily life or social time. Even after crossing the gate between this and that world, Chihiro must comply with the rules of time economy as set up by society. At first, she misses the narrow deadline for returning to real life that her friend Haku gives her. After being hired by Yubaba for menial work in the bathhouse, she has to get up early, and together with her co-workers is shown passing the check clock, which records attendance at work. Her life becomes real in the meaning of being framed in time. She is shown mopping the floor, and her performance is poor because her rhythm of movement is not yet adjusted to that of the other girls. You know what happens every day in an average Japanese school? All these kids mopping the floor in the same rhythm and speed, but she doesn't know how to do this at first. So the background music for this scene was composed by Hisaishi Jo. In the movie, there are no vocals, but they are in the original soundtrack. And as they are written by Miyazaki Hayao, they're actually essential for understanding the whole scene. That's the music as it is played in the Bill, you might appreciate it. Well, so the song is called Shigoto wa Tsudaise. Work is hard, and the text, well, you may have read it. When I thought I had just slept, it's time for work again. When I thought I had just finished, it's time to begin again. My body feels heavy, but my mood is even heavier. Hey you, the time when you work is the time when you're flourishing. Grandma told me, Grandma who was a young girl until quite recently, you're only pretty as long as you are young. Grandma told me, Grandpa who was a young lad until quite recently, you're only pretty as long as you're young. At the end of this scene, she meets this strange Kaonashi creature for the first time, the one in black, which cannot speak and has no mouth, but is very hungry. Okay. Oops, sorry. Okay. So it is a long way for Chihiro to learn about the real meaning of time in this movie. First, she masters social time and becomes a respected member of the bathhouse working community. This is part of the backstage story, or third plot, in my interpretation. But it is only after leaving the bathhouse and its strict rules of production that she gets the key to her second plot, or middle teen problem of regaining paradise. It is Zeniba, the twin sister and alter ego of Yubaba, which gives her the clue, and that's the next scene. Sorry, no, it's... I said... Now, nothing that happens is ever forgotten, even if you can't remember it. Once again, I'll play it once more. Please pay attention to the background sound. Oops. Now, once again, the background sound conveys important information. It is the sound of a spinning wheel, operated by Chihiro's new friends. But isn't this sound of the spinning wheel very close to the sound of a film projector? And couldn't we see the spool of thread as an allegory of the film reel? Then Zeniba would be one of the three Moirae, or fates, who control the threads of fate. More exactly, she would be Clotho, the one who spins the thread of life. The whole life of a person, the whole destiny of Chihiro, all her memories are contained in this thread. The thread is, in reality, the film. Thus, memory itself is contained in the medium of the film. Now, in Only Yesterday, which is actually quite misleading translation of Omoide Poroporo, which would rather translate as piecemeal memories, Takata Isao uses flashbacks to make pretty much the same statement. Taeko is the name of a young urban woman who goes on a travel to the countryside, which gives her much opportunity to rediscover, rethink, and relive her not too happy childhood. In the end, her past, represented by the images of the teenage Taeko, convinces her to restart her life and to be true to her heart. Memories can have the power of healing, as Takahata stated in his concept for Only Yesterday. I quote, "To heal a mental disease, you first dig out the past of the patient and explore the sphere of unconsciousness. When the patient objectifies him or herself and finishes self-analysis, it is said that the disease will heal by itself. Therefore, it is certainly always an innoxious first step to look back on one's past in what way soever." End of quote. Memories can heal. Looking back on memories can heal. Thus, watching anime can have a healing effect on the mind, particularly of young children of children and young people. And with this idea in mind, Takata and Miyazaki in 1988 undertook the parallel production of the stories of two pairs of siblings, Seita and Setsuko in The Grave of the Fireflies, to the left, directed by Takahata Isao, and Satsuki and Mei in My Neighbor Totoro, directed by Miyazaki, on the right. Commercially, this endeavor ended in near disaster, because both movies were screened as a double feature, which resulted in the lowest return per cell that Ghibli ever recorded before or after. It was only after they were broadcast by TV that they gained immense and lasting popularity. However, because they were separately broadcast, the original context that linked these productions together tends to be overlooked. At first glance only, the two stories seem to be markedly different. Miyazaki's Totoro plays in 1957. Two girls, Satsuki and Mei, and their father move to a rural village because their mother is being treated in a nearby hospital. They learn to adapt to the natural and cultural environment of the countryside, a world that had hitherto been only known from picture books. And they discover that this world, which is new to them, but actually has existed for a long time, is filled with powers and creatures invisible to most men. Their father, who teaches archaeology at a university in Tokyo, still knows something about the old times when trees and man coexisted peacefully, and although he himself cannot see the creatures his daughters are seeing, he encourages them to respect and trust the invisible world. The children realize that there is something transcending the boundaries of their human culture, which constantly surrounds and protects them. In the language of man, this other world is addressed as gods, kami or Buddha. But the other worldly creatures in this movie look more like giant stuffed toys than dreadful supernatural beings. The point Miyazaki wants to make is exactly that they are not supernatural, but rather absolutely natural. Although our human rationality is not able to regard them as such. It is a frequent topic of Miyazaki's movies to re-enchant the world after its modern barbarian disenchantment. It is a story about the conciliation of man and nature. In contrast, Takahata's Hotaru no Haka is set in the summer of 1945 and tells the story of 14-year-old Seita and his 4-year-old sister Setsuko. The city where they are living is destroyed by American bombardments. Their mother dies after an air raid. Their father is a naval officer who, as it turns out later, will be lost in action. The orphans move into a distant relative who only reluctantly shares food and shelter with them. They feel neglected and discriminated and decide to move out to a cave. Eventually, Setsuko dies of malnutrition. Seita buries her and goes to Tokyo to see his relatives, but he does not know where exactly they are living. Before he can find them, he also dies. In this story, which was adapted from an autobiographical novel written by Nosaka Akiyuki, there is literally nothing that protects the children from suffering and starving. No parents, no neighbors, no teachers, no gods. The only creatures willing to share their fate are fireflies, but they also die. Takahata creates, however, a perspective that is new to the original novel. The story is told by the dead boy himself, and at its end, the ghosts of Seita and Setsuko sit peacefully on a bench and from a safe distance look on their rebuilt hometown. Just one or two pictures. Here you can see actually the advertisement theater for both films shown as a double feature, and I come back to, well, yeah, okay, that's above it's Setsuko, and at the bottom Mei. Now, Otaru no Haka has mostly been interpreted as an anti-war movie. However, Takata's intention was different. Although he admitted that ultimately most in the audience took it for an anti-war movie, he stated that he wanted, quote, to make young people think about the connection between war and human psyche and also human relations, end of quote. For a real anti-war film, Takata believed it was necessary not only to draw an emotional picture of the tragedy of war, but also reflect, quote, how wars happened in the past and how wars can be avoided in the future. Of course, it would also be necessary to think about the tragedy of war, including that what Japan did to other countries, unquote. Now, these are subjects which Takahata in this movie only addresses indirectly. Anyway, neither Seita nor Setsuko are in a position to discuss the tragedy of war or of the Japanese past. Instead, they are designed to embody the dignity of humanity in the face of inhumanity. Perhaps their deaths could have been avoided if only they had been willing to compromise with the very conditions that were responsible for their deaths. They chose death, but their death will only be in vain if their ghosts, namely their stories as told in the novel and the anime, are banned from collective memory. So, superficially, these films seem to be quite different in content. Still, there are striking similarities as well. Miyazaki, actually, the depiction of Setsuko as a young girl is extremely impressive, extremely well done. I once showed this to a pediatrician, a top-class German pediatrician, and he told me that he had never thought the movements of a girl of this age could be captured in such a realistic way. But actually, Miyazaki also succeeds in giving credible expression to how girls of this age react to strange experiences. For instance, the bright smile on Mei's face after she discovers the first Totoro, her sadness after she got lost on the way to the hospital, or her elder sister's panic after hearing that her little sister might have drowned. All these attitudes seem genuine, authentic, familiar to anyone who has ever had the chance of observing children. Basically, both movies tell the same story of parentless siblings taking care of each other, as in the Brother Grimm's Hansel and Gretel, or Brother and Sister. One story is a tragedy, the other repeats as a comedy. So the optimistic story around Satsuki and Mei presents memories of family life at crisis, not because of parental neglect, but because of illness of the mother. The binding force between all members of this small household, their love and dedication for each other, is never questioned. Apparently, it is little Mei who, in a situation of mental stress, brings to life memories from her picture books in the shape of the fluffy Totoro and the grinning cat Buzz. And when she shares these imaginations with her older sister, they both get the necessary strength to endure. The tragic story around Seita and Setsuko is in itself a memory, or rather a memento, narrated by the voice of the already dead brother. So every picture of the little sister, a girl striking similar to Totoro's Mei, just have a look, becomes a memory of Setsuko. Well, Seita has also flashbacks after her death. But once more, it is the little sister whose imagination provides both siblings with new moral and physical strength. So all of the videos and CDs in the Ghibli collection, as they call it, show smiling little May marching on. But there are also commercials advertising the broadcast of The Grave of the Fireflies, which show little Setsuko in a very similar way, but posing as a soldier. And the red letters on the advertisements, not to forget that day, the day when Setsuko died. But actually the medium is the message. The movie, the anime, is the memory of Setsuko. So actually she never dies as long as this anime is shown. Anime, so to say, is paradise regained. Now, when the advertising campaign for these movies was developed, the PR company hired Itoi Shigesato, a well-known copywriter in Japan, maybe the most creative text and game designer in Japan, and he coined a catch copy that congenially summarized what Studio Ghibli had henceforth defined as its mission. We come to deliver what you have forgotten. It is doubtful that at the time when these movies were released, many among the audience, particularly among the children, which formed always the majority of spectators, really had made any experience that was similar to what the stories told. It is therefore necessary to discuss what in this case my translation, we came to deliver what you have forgotten, the English you means. In the Japanese version, there's of course no such problem of interpretation. It is impersonal. It is collective. It is an offer you may or you may not accept. But if you're willing to accept one of the two stories, you should also be willing to accept the other. And this is the very critical context of these two movies. I'll skip some parts. Nausicaa, or Nausicaa, how you want to pronounce it, was the first movie actually produced before the Studio Ghibli was founded in 1984. And this time, the heroine is a 17-year-old princess who wants to save her people, but also the creatures, the mutant creatures, from an extremely toxic biotope called Sea of Corruption. And other groups of men try to destroy this Sea of Corruption, but the giant insects of this kind of forest strike back and destroy the attackers. Only when Nausicaa, who understands that the Sea of Corruption serves as a filter to purify the earth from the damage mankind has done to it, sacrifices herself. Hostilities between man and insects, or man and nature, cede. And Nausicaa is miraculously rescued and harmony restored. Now, if anything can be called nostalgic about this story, it is certainly Nausicaa herself and nothing else. Definitely not the insects. Her youthfulness, her courage, empathy, and devotion make her the perfect role model, if you wish to say it like that, put it like that. Moreover, she's probably the most attractive female character ever designed by Miyazaki. For more than 10 years, she topped the list of the most popular anime characters in the leading fanzine, Animation. Ultimately, the story Miyazaki wanted to tell with this so-called environmentalist anime was not about saving the world, not so much. He never claims in the whole movie, also not in the manga version, that the world will be saved or will be safe. And the sea of corruption is definitely not the place where we will find our, kind of savior, whatever. Miyazaki was influenced by the works of Nakao Sasuke, an ethnobotanist who postulated the existence of prehistoric East Asian evergreen forest culture, which shaped the early cultures in East Asia. And by reading Nakao's book, Miyazaki all of a sudden got rid of his what he called inferiority complex. Because before that, he thought Japanese history is just awful. Lots of oppression, lots of aggression, and he called his former attitude cheap nationalism. And actually, he said he became a Japanese who hated the Japanese for what they had done before. But now, he found a way out by claiming that before all this happened in history, there was a time when the people, he doesn't say the Japanese, but the people lived more or less in peace and harmony with nature. And this is the Jomon period. So actually, he says, there was never, he says, during Japanese history, life was safest and most peaceful during the Jomon period. It's hard to contradict anyway. But at that time, there were neither state, nor government, nor weapons, nor war. Not even organized religion, but only simple animism. And this actually is the key to, well, peace. But of course, Miyazaki knows that this is a kind of golden age that has gone forever. So you should never expect it to come again, to come back. Actually, he sort of depicts such a village, such a community of the old ideal order in his Princess Mononoke. At the beginning, the hero, Ashitaka, is living in such a kind of community, but this community is also endangered. Ashitaka gets attacked by a wild boar, or actually it's a god, but he doesn't know that, and he is expelled from his village, and he will never come back to this paradise lost. So what he then sees is a kind of medieval Muromachi type society. Yes, he actually encounters peasants, artisans, merchants, soldiers, so everything which should be around there, but all of them are fighting each other and killing and dying. And even the animals are fighting and dying. This is not a romantic story, although some element of romance is of course included. As you may know, he falls in love with this girl named Sun. The risk of deadly failure is always present for all of the people in this story. But there's also a good chance to survive. And that is exactly what Miyazaki wants us to remember. And this is why, in this case, Studio Ghibli chose a single word as catch copy for this film, Ikiro, live. Now, in 1994, more than 10 years after he had started drawing the manga version of Nausicaa, Miyazaki finished it. And this is the cover of the volume of Animage in which this last part appeared. Of course, they asked him to draw a cover showing for a last and final time Nausicaa. Well, he said, no, don't do this. A cover should not point to the past, but should hint at the future. Now, what is it? A German World War II tank, manned with pigs in German uniforms, and a fierce-looking Red Riding Hood. And then he commented, I quote, "Our present time is similar to the time our present time in 1994 is similar to the time when Nazi Germany perished. At that time, old grandpas and saucy girls who were on the run got a lift in rattle-trap tanks just to get home somehow. Some escaped on tanks. We have to survive. That was what it was about. Such were the times. Unquote. Now all of a sudden, Nausicaa from the future has changed into Red Riding Hood from the past. It is also evident that Miyazaki alluded to the ongoing economic crisis of Japan at that time. I would certainly not call this reference to Nazi Germany nostalgia. Rather, we are reminded of another quote from Thomas Lemar, who says, "This is a deconstructive gesture vis-à-vis technological ordering designed to explore openings or moments of freedom within ordering rather than offering a new order." Unquote. So, the art of living with conflicting memories, I presume, is the ultimate lesson we can get out of Ghibli's memory delivery service. The films do not pretend to conserve an authoritative version of a given past. They collect memories to enable us to see the past in different ways and to overcome our nostalgic longing for the perfectly comfortable past. There's always something questionable and disquieting in any cultural memory. Thank you very much for your attention.